Yo, call me a seamstress to ask seamstress. Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the Gamescapes. Today, and only today, I thought we would do something incredibly fun. And this is, what if I was in charge of an IGN top 25 Sonic game? So I figured it would be fun if, what if they hired me? They were like, Fidel Gamescage, you seem like you would know your shit. What would you give us for a top 25 Sonic games? Now, the twist here is that it's not going to be my personal 25 list. All right, this is the list that I think, like, if, you know, a viewer was coming to the website to look at the top 25 Sonic games, what would make the most sense? And of course, if you like this idea and would like to see more stuff like this, please consider subscribing to your boy, support the content. Let's hit 100K this year. All right, so as you can see, I have this tier list, right? So first, we got to figure out the games we're going to consider, right? Then, you know, maybe we'll have some honorable mentions, you know, because they usually do that on these websites, right? We'll have our games that are ranked from 25 to 21, games ranked from 20 to 16, 15 to 11, 10 to 6, 5 to 2, and number 1. So let's start with games I would consider myself for like the best Sonic games. So the top 25, again, if I was doing this for a website, not me. So I'd go Sonic 1. I feel like you gotta have that in there. That's that legacy pick that, you know, started it all. Makes sense to have in there, right? Sonic CD I would consider for sure. I don't know where it would place, but I would definitely consider that. Sonic 2 is a must. You just, like, you gotta have Sonic 2 on there. Sonic 3 and Knuckles, none of this bullshit where, like, they like separate them and all that. I think that would be stupid, right? We're not putting Sonic 4 on this list at all. Sonic Mania Plus, massive, easy. We know, like, that's one of the top 5s. I feel like that's gonna be an easy one. Already, no question. Superstars. I would consider Superstars. It's not like, you know, a far-fetched from life to consider it. Maybe we'll see when we get more into the deliberations here. Knuckles Chaotix, I don't think makes the cut. Sonic the Fighters, maybe an honorable mentions as like something fun, right, for the series. Sonic R, I wouldn't. You know, music is fantastic, but I would not put it in like a top 25 Sonic game for a website, right? Sonic Spinball, no. Eggman's Robotic Machine, no. None of these ones. No Drifts, no Blast, no Tails Advent. None of this stuff over here. Really, it doesn't get picked until we go to Sonic Adventure. Obviously, Sonic Adventure we're going to consider. Sonic Adventure 2. DX and Adventure 2 Battle, it's like, that's irrelevant to me. It's like the same thing. Sonic Heroes, of course, we got to consider Sonic Heroes, you know, even though I got to put a little bit of my not liking of it aside. Shadow the Hedgehog, that might be an honorable mention right there. 06, sadly, is not making the cut, you know, as much as we like it. Again, I'm making this list for an IGN, right? I gotta, people are gonna be mad. You know, people are gonna be like, why? This is one of the worst things. Yada, I'm not dealing with that, you know? So we got Sonic and the Secret Rings, not gonna be considered, sadly. Sonic Unleashed, absolutely going to be considered, right? Sonic and the Black Knight, now again, if this is my list, this would be high up. Now, I'm going to consider it, but I don't think it's going to make it that high when I think about it in the lens that I have to. Sonic Colors, absolutely an easy one. Sonic Colors DS is a different game, so I would consider that because I would like people to know that there's differences, you know, if I were to consider it if it makes it, right? We have Sonic Generations. I would even consider Sonic Generations 3DS. Sonic X Shadow Generations, no question, easily, right? Sonic Lost World, I'll think about it for now. I don't think it's making the cut. I don't want it to make the cut, but I'll think about it. Sonic Forces, absolutely not making it. Sonic Frontiers absolutely needs to be in there, right? Sonic Dream Team, it could make the cut for honorable mention, right? And then obviously the Sonic Advance games we got, I think like we can consider all 3 of them. You know, whether we put all 3 of them or not, we got to consider them. Sonic Rush, easily, we got to consider those. I wouldn't consider the Rivals games. Runners might be a fun honorable mention discussion, potentially, depending on how many we have. And then obviously we have Riders and Zero Gravity. Let's put them in the discussion, at least for maybe consideration. Let's see if they even make it in there. Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, no. I would put All-Stars Transformed and Cross Worlds in the consideration. I don't think I would put any of the Olympics. I mean, at most, maybe the London one in honorable mentions, if I'm even doing that. You know what I mean? If I'm putting more than 5 in there. Then it's all these, you know, spin-offs. Sonic Battle, no. Not in the top 25, you know. Murder of Sonic, that might be a fun honorable mention. Sonic Rumble's not making it. None of the mobile games are making it, right? Yeah, no, I think that's all the games. Okay, then these are all fan games. Okay, so right here we have the games we would consider. Now, how many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7, 14, 21, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. So we have 33 picks in here. Let's say we want 5 honorable mentions that are not in order, right? So we got to get rid of at least 8 of these. Oof, that's tough. Well, no, if we're going to have 5, no, we just got to get rid of 3, right? Because 7, 14, 21, 28, and then 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. So we got to get rid of 3 of these. I think... Again, I'm at IGN. They're like, Fidel, you gotta give 5 honorable mentions. What are you picking, Mr. Gamescage? Well, first of all, I'm going to eliminate. I think I'm gonna remove Murder of Sonic. I think Murder of Sonic is fun, but it is not at its core a Sonic game. So I am gonna, remove it. But you do get some great dialogue. But I'm upset that I'm removing it. It is what it is. I think I will remove Sonic Colors DS. Right? I'm gonna remove that one. Right, that puts us at what, 7, 14, 21, 28, 29, 30, 31. We got to remove one more. I think I'll remove the Olympics. I think, Olympics are great, but those are Mario and Sonic Olympic games. I don't think that defines Sonic to me. So right away here, we have our lineup. So these are the 30 games, right? Now for this one, we're obviously going to put 5 of them in honorable mentions, right? So if I was to think of the honorable mentions, I think right away, in no order, I would go easily, no question. I think I would go Dream Team. And I think a lot of people would agree with me. It'd be like, hey, this is a fun mobile game that actually, has the 3D movement of the series, has still been getting content updates to launch, and fans are praying for it to come to console one day, but it has no right being as good as it is, even if it is not the most, ambitious game in the series. It's still really great. So I'd put that in honorable mentions, right? What else would I put? I would put Sonic Runners. I think Sonic Runners is another mobile game that tried to have like a unique art style, right? It had the endless runner loop in an era where that was, becoming massive on mobile, but it did it in such a Sonic-like way that it stood out a lot. Like the gameplay was just super addictive, super fun. It had amazing music. It like had that addictive replay value. Sadly, it was killed because, monetization and all that stuff. But yeah, so Sonic Runners, I would put in honorable mentions. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put Generations 3DS as the honorable mention, right? Because, I would say, like, while it's obvious Sonic Generations is going to be somewhere on this list, it is worth noting that Generations 3DS was just gens in name, but it was effectively a different game on 3DS. It was a rush-styled game where it was all 2D levels, you had the boost, and it even had different levels in it that represented different levels of the series, like... If you think about it overall, between Gens 3DS, Gens console, Shadow Gens, there is like a lot of Sonic levels over the entire series just being represented in some way or another. So I would give a shout out to Gens 3DS, at least in honorable mentions. I'm going to put All-Stars Racing Transformed in honorable mentions. Again, I would like to keep the core of the top 25 to like, main Sonic-like games, but All-Stars Transformed is awesome. I love that game. I think the flying mechanic and water mechanic are great. The campaign mode is great in it. Movement is great. It ages a little badly in terms of like the visual style. The colors look really washed out. But for the most part, the game was super fun at a time where Mario Kart didn't really have much competition, and it really did lean into the Sega aspect with the crossovers between Sega. So that's cool. So I think this is an easy one. I think the last one I would put in honorable mentions, I'd put Sonic the Fighters. I'd be like, hey, we should at least shout this game out. Like, it was a fun arcade Sonic fighting game. It didn't do too much in terms of, the FGC, but there's still a hardcore community that plays the game, right? They care about it, and people to this day yearn for this. It even made a reappearance in a Yakuza game. See, I'm putting myself in their shoes, how they would write this shit. You know what I mean? So let's do this. Now, we officially are in the conversation, right? I'm at the IGN boardroom. They're like, all right, Fidel, you've grabbed your honorable mentions. You've grabbed the games you're considering, right? What would you put? All right, I think easily, no question. At number 25, I'm putting Shadow the Hedgehog. I feel like Shadow the Hedgehog is an entry that, while obviously is not the most critically acclaimed game in the series, right? and is not a game that showcases Sonic at its peak. It is a game that had a lot of significance to Shadow's factor and coolness today. I mean, you see the influence of Shadow the Hedgehog in the movie, right? With the motorcycle and the gun, you know what I mean? And I still do think that this game having multiple branching paths is a cool idea, right? There's cool ideas in this, and there's still cool levels you can access in the game, you know, whether it's the Space Colony Arc, whether it's the digital circuit, you know, whether it's what's called the carnival level that you go to. And there's some really dark places. Like, there's a lot of funny aspects about the game. There's a lot of cool story elements. Obviously, people make fun of the shooting, but there are things about the game that are endearing and really did add to Shadow's character and what people expect from it, and a lot of banger vocal themes. So I do think bare minimum, number 25 for Shadow the Hedgehog, just because of its influence on how people saw the character. All right, now I gotta think of number 24. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. This is where I'd put Sonic Superstars, right? If we're gonna go like this, right, where boom, this is 25, 24, I'd put Sonic Superstars. I've said this before, I feel like I like Sonic Superstars, right? And again, if I'm considering this for like, you know, a public list for people, this is a game that's super fun. It's enjoyable with friends or family. It doesn't do too much of anything to push the series forward. It is a very safe, you know, modern version of what a 2D Sonic game is, but it's enjoyable. And I feel like it should at least be represented because it is a great game through and through. All right, now I gotta pick number 23. Out of this hat of things, what would I put at number 23? What am I feeling is still a great game, but I would put near the bottom? You know what? I'm gonna go, this is where Lost World goes. And I actually think, you know what? I'm gonna be bold. I'm gonna be a bold one. Lost World goes in the honorable mentions for the parkour system and the nice aesthetic, but I'm gonna make Sonic the Fighters number 25. I feel like that is a good number 25. You have a fighting game, right? It's a cool, different style of Sonic. People love the cartoony animations. I'm taking the risk. So number 25 is Sonic the Fighters. Number 24 is Shadow. Number 23 is Sonic Superstars, right? What's number 22? Again, IGN's watching my bag. They got a gun to my head. They're thinking about it. I'm thinking this is where we put Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, right? Because I think Sonic Riders Zero Gravity is a game that's important to the fans because the Riders series is very cool. It also made things extremely streamlined, right, for Sonic. You know, it did the thing where, you know, Sonic Riders originally was really criticized for you know, how difficult it was, and Zero Gravity kind of like slowed things down a little bit, but, you know, changed things in terms of adding a gear shift system where if you got a certain amount of rings, your vehicle would be able to shift into a different mode, which this encouraged trying different vehicles, trying different characters, right? And you had the actual Zero Gravity system. And so while I think I don't like the simplicity as much as original Riders, I still think, you know, it's a great game, has a story mode, has Grand Prix modes, has a lot of content, and, you know, it introduces Sega crossover characters. So I feel like that's a good spot for it. This would be what, like number 22, right? If we're going like 25, 24, 23, 22. So number 22 for Zero Gravity. I feel pretty confident. What would I go next? What do I feel like has to, you know, be the cutoff for number 21? You know what? I would go OG Riders. I think, you know, both Sonic Riders games, I think, should both be here. I don't think they crack the top 20. Now, again, if this was my personal list, I would have put like Sonic Riders in top 50. But if I'm thinking objectively, this game is better than Riders, right? But again, these games really did have extremely difficulty curves, right? And again, I appreciate introducing characters like the Babylon Rogues and the 2 story modes at the final story, which is really cool. I still think they are still racing game spin-offs at the end of the day that are very appealing to the hardcore community. And I would even mention that, like, there are fans still making fan servers for this game, you know, XD, DX versions of it with different characters, different modes. Like, people still love this game and keep it to high regard. So that's where I would put Sonic Riders. All right, we are now in number 20 to the 20 to 16 range. All right, so let's keep thinking here. What would I put around this range? This will be the controversial one of the list that I think I'm going to stick by. Again, this will be the one where, like, ooh, you get some commenters riled up. I think Sonic here is number 20. I've said this before. I love Sonic Heroes in terms of its visual and art style, but I do think the game, you know, slippery controls, having to replay the game 4 times for different stories, you know, how long some of the levels can drag out, how, you know, some campaigns are actively worse than the others, like the Chaotix campaign is brutal with how much stuff you have to find in the levels to progress, or, you know, the hard mode that is Team Shadow that makes things, you know, insane with already how slippery the game's controls are and the camera are. But again, it's an important game in the series, so I still like the visual style of it and everything. So number 20 for it, I feel like is a solid spot. I can live with that. All right, number 19. Now I feel like if I want to be a little bit bold, a little bit crazy, you know what? I would put Sonic Racing Crossroads. I think Crossroads would be an 18. I think, you know, I'd be like, hey, this is a newer entry, but so far from how addictive the arcadey nature of the racing is to the constant update to the game every 2 to 3 weeks, it is a game that has kept the players engaged. You know, it's got a great roster, great track variety, you know, the return of extreme gear, and you have the gear system, the gadget system, where players are, you know, choosing how they want to play the game in their style, and this game keeps you with that one more, right? So I think that's a great spot for Sonic Racing Crossroads. I think if we're looking at this list, yeah, that would be the last spin-off spot, which I'm fine with. I can live with this. What I would put at number 18, this would be my bold one. This is where I put Sonic 1. I think Sonic 1 is the, you know, the legacy pick. You know, you gotta give it its respect, even if you don't put it that high. It's the game that started it all. It introduced, you know, going fast, momentum-based gameplay. And I do think of the, you know, classics, it ages, you know, the worst, right? You know, obviously with how many times it does slow you down, or areas like, you know, Labyrinth Zone or Marble Zone, right? Like there are lows, you know, but, you know, the highs of the game and, you know, just that the sprites of the game, the music, the style, it really was the start of something that we really didn't have at that time that I think is still important to people. So I think having it this low, but still, you know, caring to represent it makes a lot of sense. All right, what would I put around number 17? So I'm going through our options of the games we'd consider. I would throw in Sonic Advance 1. I think this is a good spot for Sonic Advance 1. That would be what number, if this is 2019, 18? Yeah, number 17 for Sonic Advance 1 feels great. I think of the advanced games, it's probably the weakest, but that's not saying a bad thing because I think all the advanced games are great. It introduced, you know, these amazing sprites that fans use to this day. It's got super fun level design, and while the game is criticized a lot for, you know, the bottomless pits that Dimps is known for, from the areas you go to in the game to introducing multiple playable characters, right? Because you can play as Knuckles in this game, you can play as Amy. I don't know if Cream is introduced until the second game, but advanced, great platforming. You know, I like how they have bosses from original Sonic 1 in it as like the final boss gauntlet, which I think is really cool. But yeah, more arcadey, more fun, and a lot of people know Sonic Advance via the Sonic Flash game on PC. So I think that would be a good spot for it on like an IGN or whatever website kind of list. All right, next up, we got to think of our next entry. I'm gonna go, what game would I drop off here? Oh, wait, I made a mistake. I put Sonic Gens and Sonic Shadow Gens. Shit. Well, that's actually a good thing because now I can grab another game here. I can put back in Murder of Sonic, right? And then I could put that, well, no, because then, wait, hold on. Let me do some math, right? All right, I mentally figured it out. Okay, all I did now was that I kept this, I put Murder of Sonic at the honorable mentions, and I bumped Sonic Runners up to number 25. Making these lists is tough, though. I will say, like, you know, when you gotta take a bit of your bias for these things aside, it is tough. And the first tough call I really gotta make here is Sonic and the Black Knight. I think Sonic and the Black Knight is going to go to number 15 because, again, if it was my list, I would have had this in top 10. But I got to factor that, you know, the waggling, right, and the low Metacritic and how people felt about it about the time. But if I was to really, you know, make a step forward and say, like, this game, yes, the waggling is not the most, you know, cool thing, but The style of the game is incredibly cool. The story is what keeps fans in love with Sonic. You know, it is the best portrayal of the character for people that really care about the story of Sonic the Hedgehog and those characters in that world, right? And I think, you know, whether it's dialogue, whether it is the gameplay that was improved over Black Knight, whether it's some of the party modes, you could even get an XP system in the game where you're unlocking different things. Like, the game actually has a lot to offer in terms of replay value, extra missions. And I think Black Knight, while again, the waggling is not the most appealing thing, I still think it's an important part of Sonic, you know, down to the super, you know, final Excalibur fight at the end and everything. I think it is an important game to represent, and this would be like the one where like they'd be like, I'm not sure, Fidel, but I'll be like, trust me, people will be okay with this. All right, next up in the games I would consider, I think this is where I would throw in, I'm gonna put Sonic Rush Adventure here. I think that's a good place for Sonic Rush Adventure, you know, following up Sonic Rush, right? I do think it is not as stylish and cool as original Rush, right? But, you know, the island system, you get to, you know, unlock all these different vehicles. Some of them are a little unnecessary, and the game kind of forces replay value on you by making you redo levels to get resources. It helps that the levels are actually fun to go to, you know, where there is your coral cave, whether it's like the misty pirate level, whether it's the starting area with all the mushrooms you go through, you know, and whether it's the story, you know, going back to Blaze, finding Marine, who's the goated character. I just think, you know, it doesn't get to the original Rush as high just because of all the fluff they kind of add to the game with like having to get resources and having 5 different vehicles for travel on the touchscreen. Like, I would have much rather a more streamlined experience, but the game is still incredibly fun. Sonic Rush games are 2D boost games, and they do such a good job of being that. All right, so we have our number 14, right? You know, so far the website is looking kind of crazy. All right, but I appreciate this. I think next up in games I would consider, so 15, 14, what do we think is number 13 for Mr. and Mrs. IGN? I think this is where we throw in Sonic Advance 3 here. I think Sonic Advance 3 is not as good as 2 because 2, I think the only flaw really with 2 is like the boss can be a little difficult, but the sense of speed and movement and level design I think is overall better, right? But Sonic Advance 3 introduced, you know, the partner system, right? You have a little hub world, you got a bit more story, so there's a bit more cool stylistic things you could do with the characters, and obviously the sprites are incredibly beloved by the fans. So I'd put Sonic Advance 3 in number 14. And in fact, you know what I would kind of do on this list? I would just put both of them. I feel like they're not that far apart. All right, so we're doing a cutoff of the top 10. All right, I think if I'm doing a cutoff, guys, of top 10, I think Sonic CD is the one that barely makes it to top 10. I think it goes in 11. I think Sonic CD stylistically is probably one of the peaks of 2D Sonic, right? If you think, obviously everybody thinks of the animated intro, even just the visuals of the game, right? Whether it's your Metallic Madness or your Tidal Tempest or your Palm Tree Panics, like wherever you go, there's a lot of colorful visuals. The level design does suffer a lot from, you know, just a lot of things you bump into, but I'd always thought the future and past mechanic was super good. The music is fantastic. I have a JP and English or American version of the soundtrack, right? The bosses are really great, and again, there's a lot of replay value if you're trying to get, you know, the full ending and you're trying to get all the time stones, you're trying to go back in time. Like I said, there could be a lot to the game. I don't think it's quite a top 10, but I do think it's a game that is incredibly fun overall. All right, now I have to make the top 10 Sonic games. All right, again, I gotta mix a bit of myself here, but a mix of a bit of logic over here. So I think what we do for number 10, again, we're thinking about how these websites, you know, if I'm doing this for IGN, but I want to put a little bit of modern flair into it, I'm gonna make number 10 Sonic Rush, right? I think that's a good spot for Sonic Rush. I think that represents it super well. You know, it returned 2D. I think it showed that 2D Sonic can evolve, right? I think that was the most important thing about Sonic Rush's release, is it showed that 2D Sonic can be more than just, you know, jumping on enemies and moving on. It can have style, it can have this cool trick system, it can have the boost. It actually introduced the boost formula to the series that we would then later see in games like Colors or Generations or, you know, Unleash. etc. So it was technically the foundation of everything, and you get the introduction of Blaze, who becomes a fan favorite. You get 2 versions of the levels that are different, and they each have different ways of tackling them, and trying to S rank the levels is really difficult. And again, while the game does have the plague of some, bottomless pits because of dims, I still think overall it is a pretty fantastic game with a story with a lot of heart too, and a very sick battle between Blaze and Sonic leading into a supersonic fight in the finale. With too black, too strong, too black, too strong. Shout out to Hideki on the soundtrack. All right, now we got to think of number 9. What do we think is number 9 here? What am I being too generous to? I think this is where I be bold, I be modern. I'm gonna put Sonic 2 at number 9. I think Sonic 2, we all agree, fantastic 2D Sonic game, great levels. You get your chemical plant, you get your casino nights, your hilltop zones, your aquatic ruins. Like, there's a lot of great places. Obviously, the music is fantastic. Level design is massively improved from Sonic 1, and obviously you get the introduction of Tails. So W Sonic 2, and of course you get like a true supersonic fight here for the first time. It's awesome. I think Sonic 2 absolutely deserves its flowers in the top 10. All right, we gotta think of number 8 on this list. What is number 8 on an IGN list? All right, I think this is where Sonic Colors goes. Right? I think that's a good spot. 10, 9, 8. Sonic Colors as number 8, I think, is a great spot for it, right? Like, it is a game that people go back to because it is simple, right? This game is one that the franchise kind of needed at the time. They just needed a W. And I think Sonic Colors is that safe W. While the story is very safe, I think the theming of the space amusement park is super fun. The boost formula is really cool. It went with a more Mario-like system with power-ups, right? But they had a Sonic spin on it, like laser, how you're going through the air, or you have drill, right? Or you have rocket that puts you all the way up in the sky. And while the game is criticized still to this day for having, a lot of 2D areas, it is still a good mix of 3D and 2D that is very simple and fun to get into. So I think number 8 for Sonic Colors here is probably a good spot. All right, so we've got number 7. What do I gotta go with for number 7? I feel like this is the max I can go with Unleashed. I think this is as high as I can go with Unleashed, and I will explain why, right? Unleashed is a game that, if I were to pitch this to the website, I'd be like, guys, you have to understand, Unleashed is a game that visually to this day is incredible, right? To the fans is fantastic. The day stages are by far the best design in the entire series, showcasing a great sense of speed. And yes, the Werehog can drag, but even the Werehog, when you at least unlock combos, learn moves, and everything, it is like super fun, and the levels are not that bad to go through. But I promise you, right, like the story of the game, the music of the game, the day stages of the game are very, very strongly respective of Sonic, down to the final battle, feeling like the final thing you'll ever do as Sonic, with the supersonic fight, with introducing Chip as Dark Gaia, with Light Gaia, all those final things, down to running out from the sunset in the credits. I think Sonic Unleashed absolutely would deserve its flowers. But again, if I was pitching this, too many people would be fighting me to say it would be there. But again, so many people would be happy to see it that high. So I think this is a good spot for it. For number 6, we're gonna go on an IGN list. I think we're gonna go Sonic Frontiers. I think Sonic Frontiers is the modern Sonic, that changed things for the franchise, right? Like, yes, there would be a lot of people, that the later half of the game is less developed than the later parts. But I do think this game brought Sonic back into the foray. I think the open zone gameplay is incredibly fun. You have the cyberspace levels that give you that old school action. You have 2D levels in there, 3D levels in there. You have some of the greatest boss fights, most hype boss fights in the series history. You have fantastic music going from, piano melodies to EDM to rock to metal. Like, there is a lot of music represented in the game. And again, it has a toned down story that, while for some people is a little bit too toned down, was important for the fans. And again, this game really did set a foundation at a time where it felt like Sonic was truly down in the dumps. And I think Sonic Frontiers is going to be remembered for people for a long, long time. So look, we have our top 5. So our top 5 without the order yet that we have to figure out is Sonic X Shadow Gens, Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Adventure, Sonic Mania, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles. All right, so shit, I'm gonna go Sonic Adventure 2. I think so. Ooh, yeah, I think Sonic Adventure 2 at number 5 is a perfect placement because of these games, it is still one where people, could say they have issues with some of the, the mech stages or the Knuckles levels. But look, Sonic Adventure 2 represents the series defining traits that still appear to this day, right? Whether it's Shadow the Hedgehog, whether it's the cool factor, whether it's City Escape, whether it's Space Colony Arc, whether it's the story of Maria or Gerald, right? Or, the dialogue bits that people have memorized all the way to this day. And I still do think Knuckles levels are cool. I think Tails levels are cool when you learn them. This is a game that rewards learning it, right? And I still think it's incredibly fun to this day. I mean, you have Metal Harbor, you have set pieces in this game. Like, there is so much ambition in Sonic Adventure 2 that deserves a lot of love despite its flaws with some different gameplay styles. I think the introduction of Team Dark, right? And, Team Sonic, I think, is fantastic, and I think overall it's a game that is incredibly important, and to this day, represented in movie form, original form, nothing really beats that high of live and learn playing with a finale with Super Sonic and Super Shadow, with Shadow making a sacrifice even though the next game he comes back. All right, I think here, this is where I think Sonic Adventure goes here, right? Now, the reason I think Sonic Adventure is above Adventure 2 is I think besides big, I think the gameplay is incredibly more consistent. I think the hub world is super enjoyable to learn, right? Like, you talk to different NPCs, they have storylines that evolve, they even change through different character stories you go through, and you learn lessons via each campaign. With Sonic, it is the tale of the hero, right? And you learn about Sonic's character, right? And who he is as a person. With Knuckles, you learn about the Echidna tribe, why he feels so isolated, right? With Tails, he gets to understand, to believe in himself and truly make his own character, right? You have Amy introduced as a playable character, who obviously you find out a lot more about her love for Sonic, but also being independent and doing her own thing and trying to impress, obviously, Sonic, while still being girly pop, living her life. She has a whole storyline with like a little bird that she's trying to protect too, showcasing her love for animals. You have a sad storyline with Gamma, who is a robot who figures how fucked up it is to be working under Eggman, to the point where he goes and he kills all his brothers to free them from Eggman. And of course, you have Big the Cat, which, to be honest, when you learn that cafe is not that bad, but I understand why people have their issues with it, and it all culminates in a supersonic fight that at the time we had not gotten, and so in 3D, and so to get a 3D supersonic fight with Open Your Heart, introduction of Crush 40, Sonic Adventure is still a game that to this day does a lot for the series in terms of characters, level design, gameplay, and style. All right, and then the top 3, I think this is pretty easy. So I do think number 3 would go to Sonic Mania Plus. Easy one. Sprite work is incredible. Great celebration game of the series. With Mania Plus, you get even more characters with Mighty and Ray as weird pigs. You get Sonic, Tails, Knuckles. Knuckles gets his own unique stage if you go through it. The sprites are incredible. The level selection's fantastic, whether it is your Green Hills, your Oil Oceans, your, Studiopolis, which is like a massive, iconic level now from the music of it, from the choice of Stardust Speedway to, Press Garden Stone, which is gorgeous cherry blossom-like level in there. Like, there is great, or even the cowboy level, the western one that's in there that's super good. Like, there is a lot of amazing stuff about Mania. Literally the only thing holding it back from being like number 1 is that it's not all new stages, but the content that's in there, the time attack modes, the sprite work, gameplay, level design, it felt like it was a celebration of the series that fans to this day love and casuals love. So Mania, absolutely got to be a top 3. Number 2 goes to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Again, this is my list. This is what I think, would make sense for an IGN or whatever, top 25. The Sonic 3 and Knuckles, this is, a fantastic platformer, right? Beyond just a Sonic game, it's a fantastic platformer in terms of its level designs, how much content it has with Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles in there, the expansion pack in there with all the, you get like a full extra campaign with the introduction of Hypersonic, with actual storytelling via, the character sprites, which I think is super good. Like, whether it is the story of like, Knuckles being a bad guy, then being betrayed by Eggman, then joining you and stopping him, right, from the final battle battle with hypersonic where you're flying through space. Like, it's just so fucking good. And again, like the level variety is crazy. You get Flying Battery, you get Hydro City, which is iconic, you get Ice Cap, you get Launch Base, you get Mushroom Hill, you get Angel Island, you get Sky Sanctuary. Like, so many places that are like visually incredible in terms of sprite work and everything. So Sonic 3 and Knuckles absolutely would be number 2. Now, I think, no question, bar none, if again, you weren't talking about my personal favorite, someone else's, it's Sonic X Shadow Generations. That is the number 1. I think that is easily by far the number 1. And the reason for that is, 1, it showcases why Sonic is cool, right? You know, the boost formula and revisiting all the best locations in the series represents why Sonic is cool, at least on a gameplay note, right? You get a touch of modern with the 3D boost levels. You get classic in terms of the classic Sonic being introduced in there, right? And obviously the story, you could argue, is whatever, but in terms of gameplay, it's fantastic. There's a ton of content if you factor in all the challenges you can do with the game. There's boss fights represented from across the series, right? Whether it's fighting Perfect Chaos, Metal Sonic, Silver, Shadow, right? Like, they recreate the iconic battles of the game. And now with the addition of Shadow Generations, you have a more darker story, bigger set pieces, and it's funny, Shadow Generations almost works as a sequel to Sonic Generations because you get even more levels from the series represented. You know, like, you get even more 06 represented with Kingdom Valley, right? You get Sonic Forces being redeemed with Sunset Heights in Shadow Generations, right? You get Space Colony Arc in there, right? Like, you get just cool ass shit given to you. They even put, you know, some Sonic Frontiers in there. Like, they did an incredible job with Sonic X Shadow Generations. I think it is a fantastic package, including, you know, really cool boss fights, whether it's Mephiles, whether it's the Bio Lizard, right? Whether it's the final boss with Black Doom, and, you know, Shadow getting his own abilities. Like, there is so much. And even with base gens, like, there's power-ups you can get for Sonic in there. There's the red rings to collect. There's artwork. Like, this package of Sonic X Shadow Generations truly, I think, is objectively, if you're not talking about my fan favorite, your fan favorite, it is probably the best Sonic thing you can get that represents the cool energy, the series past, the series history, like, everything about it represented incredibly well here. All right, so let's go through this the IGN style. So, honorable mentions: Sonic Lost World, Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic All-Stars Racing Transform, Sonic Generations 3DS, and Sonic Dream Team. Then number 25, Sonic Runners. Number 24, Sonic the Fighters. Number 23, Shadow the Hedgehog. Number 22, Sonic Superstars. Number 21, Sonic Riders Zero Gravity. Number 20, Sonic Riders. Number 19, Sonic Heroes. Number 18, Sonic Racing Crossroads. Number 17, Sonic the Hedgehog. Number 16, Sonic Advance. Number 15, Sonic and the Black Knight. Number 14, Sonic Rush Adventure. Number 13, Sonic Advance 3. Number 12, Sonic Advance 2. Number 11, Sonic CD. Number 10, Sonic Rush. Number 9, Sonic 2. Number 8, Sonic Colors. Number 7, Sonic Unleashed. Number 6, Sonic Frontiers. Number 5, Sonic Adventure 2, number 4, Sonic Adventure, number 3, Sonic Mania Plus, number 2, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and number 1, Sonic X Shadow Generations. Again, this is not my specific list. This is if I was to make a really good list for an IGN or a website. I genuinely think, bro, if they had put out a list like this, people would be like, wow, that was actually like really good. You know, I would maybe swap this or that, but for the most part, they covered the bangers and they put them, you know, in a reasonable, fair order and actually commented on them. So yeah, let me know in the comment section below if you think I cooked. Would a website take this list? Do you believe in it? Let me know in the comment section below. I love you guys. Thank you all for watching. And of course, I will see you all next time. Peace out.